Mary Bousted, que está ali, aqui ao meu lado, é o Secretária Geral do National Education Union, o maior sindicato de educação do Reino Unido, com cerca de 450 mil afiliados, é também o maior sindicato de educação da Europa. Mary integra o Comitê Executivo do Trade Union Congress, que reúne 48 sindicatos, representando mais de 5,5 milhões de trabalhadores, é membro do Comitê Executivo da Internacional da Educação, escreve regularmente artigos para jornais e revistas sobre educação e aparece frequentemente nos meios de comunicação social do Reino Unido, sendo uma oradora exímia e uma adversária temível. E acreditem, eu sou testemunha. Mary, you have the floor. Thank you very much for coming.
I will not be fearsome today. I am feeling very fraternal and feeling the warmth of being here in Portugal, not just the sun, but the people also. On behalf of my union, the National Education Union, I send greetings to FENPROF and I send solidarity in your struggle to gain respect for the teaching profession. And that is a struggle which the National Education Union is also engaged in with the English government. And I want to talk in the 15 minutes as I have about how we are conducting that struggle and how we are organising to win. So all the problems that you have referred to in this morning's conference are also absolutely true of the problems in England. We don't have enough teachers. The teachers we have leave the profession. A third of teachers leave the profession within 5 years. That means that we are not recruiting teachers and we are not replacing them. And England has one of the youngest teaching forces in the OECD. And what has happened in the past is we've recruited loads and loads of young teachers and then burned them out. But it didn't matter because we had lots of other young teachers ready to join the profession. That has now stopped. So last year the government missed its secondary teacher training targets by 41%. This year it is going to miss them by over a half. Graduates are not joining teaching because of low pay, excessive and intensive work, poor quality work, an inspectorate, an inspection system which demeans teachers and shows them no respect, and low pay. And that is compounded by very poor funding in our schools. Between 2010 and 2020, schools lost 9% of their funding in real terms, and during that time, 1 million extra pupils went through the system. So 1 million extra pupils and nearly 10% less funding. The biggest risk on the government's risk register for education is loss of life or limb because of dilapidated school buildings. So we send our members and children into dilapidated buildings. In the UK now, we have the largest class sizes in the OECD, on a par with Mexico and Colombia. And we are meant to be a developed country and the 6th richest country in the world. Now for years, my members were told, you have to pay the price of profligate labour spending and austerity, everyone has to share in austerity. But what do we find? We find the private sector wage rises consistently above inflation. But in the last 12 years, teacher pay rises have been below inflation. So now teachers have seen their pay growth amongst the slowest of all professions and the lowest of all professions. And then the government wonders why it isn't attracting more teachers. So, on the 1st of February, my union started strike action against the government. To give you some extent of the scale, we now have 500,000 members because we have recruited 60,000 more members since the action began. We organise in 23,000 schools. We are not the only union. There is another big teacher union which is not taking strike action. Our average membership in a secondary school is about 15 members. Our average membership in a primary school is about 4 members. And in addition to that, we've had 30 years of a Tory Conservative government who have introduced a raft of anti-union laws. The most significant were in 2016, which set limits on the voting thresholds in order to take strike action. So in order to take strike action, a union has to have 50% of its members voting. That's the first threshold. And the second threshold is that if you meet the first threshold of 50% of your members voting, you have to have 40% of the whole membership, the equivalent of voting yes to action. So in our case, if we have 50% of the members voting, if we get that threshold, 80% of those members have to vote yes before we can take strike action. And the votes have to be done by post. And we balloted in the middle of a postal strike. I think you can see the problem. So, I want to talk about what we did to overcome those hurdles. But to begin with, I was so moved by the film of your marching. I want to show you the March of NEU members on the 1st of February in London to show you that my members are your members and your members are my members. So here we are, the NEU marching through London. Teachers, don't you love them? And I just would like to say that the film shows several of the messages and tactics we are using in this dispute. The first is to use the voices and the faces of members. So yes, I am on that film because I'm the General Secretary and I spoke to the crowd. Yes, I'm there. I'm leading the union. But the union isn't me. The union is its members. So we make sure that the voices of members and our diverse group of members are there. In particular, we put forward women, because women make up 75% of our membership. So they must be seen and they must be heard. Women are the union. If we are going to win this dispute, we have to carry parents with us because we have taken 5 days of strike action which have closed 20,000 schools. So that means parents don't have the school for their children. So we have to explain to parents that in fighting for our profession, we are fighting for our pupils, we are fighting for their children. So we are conducting an industrial campaign, that's a strike action, but absolutely a campaign about social weight. We are the union with the biggest social weight in the community. FENPROF will be the same, because schools are the most popular public service in the community. Every parent will encounter the school. So we explain to parents and to the community why we are taking action. And we are making sure we emphasise some points really clearly and simply. We say, teachers have had the slowest wage growth of any profession. The loss in pay, combined with increased workload, has profound consequences for your children. Teaching has become an unattractive profession for graduates. All this has led to a teacher supply crisis, and that means that your children are learning in the highest class sizes for primary for 40 years, the highest class sizes for secondary since records began, secondary class sizes on a par with Mexico in England, a third of teachers leave within 5 years, a narrow curriculum which is the narrowest in the OECD. Pre-16 and post-16 now, England has the narrowest curriculum in the OECD. And we talk about artificial intelligence. We can't get computer teachers. We can't get maths teachers. We can't get science teachers. I'm an English teacher. It used to be hard to become an English teacher. Too many graduates wanted to train to teach English. Last year, the government missed its English targets by 40%. So we keep hammering home that message, that our fight is a fight not just for our profession, but a fight for your children. And we say that in order to meet change, we need an inflation-proof pay rise. Now there's a seamless link there between the profession and pupils and your children. And that is a social reach into the community with parents and grandparents and with the public at large. And the second thing is, we make this an argument of fairness. We say now, actually, this is a fair thing, but we also say it's supply and demand. And we have kept banging on with those arguments about teacher shortages and the effect it's having on our children's education. We've done that since, for years now, but very intensively since February. But now there is real evidence that it has broken through. So I want to show you a clip. It's a bit long, but not too long, from Channel 4, major broadcaster on 7 o'clock news, which explains the teacher supply crisis and shows that that key message from the union has got through. And the second film now. Second film.
Inevitably, in a strike, there's a lot of talk, isn't there, about pay. But we want to explore something else the National Education Union has said in the course of this dispute, and that is that teachers, they say, are leaving the profession in droves in England. Now, the Department for Education says there are more teachers now than over a decade ago, but the need has also grown a lot. And the more teachers that quit, the more new ones you need to train. Now, in Scotland and in Wales, teachers have agreed to end their industrial action. So we're talking here primarily about England, although teachers are also striking in Northern Ireland too. And for the biggest teaching union, this is all a very big deal.
1 in 3 newly qualified teachers will leave in the first 5 years, and that is down to the pressures in the classroom. So not having support staff in the classroom, or not having the funding or resources to be able to do their job.
Now, we've heard it there. In England, within 5 years of qualifying, 1 in 3 teachers quit. And that figure checks out. It's actually from the Department for Education. So for every 100 freshly qualified teachers represented by these white dots here with their careers ahead of them, 30 of them quit the classroom within 5 years. And what you're seeing here is not a one-off, it's been the pattern for over a decade.
We have a large number of new teachers that the sector relies on, and indeed in England we have one of the youngest workforces in the world. So it is a problem that early career teachers are not being retained.
The system depends on having a constant supply, like a fresh batch of teachers to replace all those who leave. So, are enough teachers actually being trained? There's a recruitment target in England, the dotted line that you see here. Yellow line shows you that it's been under target since 2015. Under target pretty much every year with the exception of 1 year during COVID. And in this last year in particular, it's been massively under target. If teachers are quitting and not enough are joining the profession, then you get gaps. Look at what's happened to teacher vacancies in England. These are full and part-time teaching posts that schools just haven't been able to fill. Between 2010 and 21 here, look at those vacancies. They've shot up, in fact, they've nearly trebled. And by the way, Wales and Northern Ireland have a rosier recruitment picture. Scotland doesn't collect the data centrally. But in England, all these vacancies are clearly a concern.
In order to make teaching a more attractive profession, the government could look at the pay and historically what pay has done relative to other occupations. But I think a big part is probably the workload. And there's probably been some work to reduce that workload, but when you compare it to other occupations, it's still too high.
So the Department for Education says it's offering specialist bursaries to try and attract talented trainees. But are there enough teachers in classrooms? Let's take secondary schools. If you want small class sizes, if you want lower workloads, then overall you need small numbers of pupils per teacher. And Scotland has fewer pupils per teacher than England, Wales and Northern Ireland. But how does the UK as a whole compare internationally? Well, helpfully, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, has compared secondary school pupils per teacher in 38 countries. These figures are for 2020, and remember, the smaller the numbers here, the fewer pupils there are per teacher. Now, out front is Greece. Then we have South Korea, so we're in the middle, educationally high-performing country. The OECD average is here, Germany just in front of it. All the way back here is the UK, with one of the highest numbers of pupils per teacher, alongside the likes of Colombia and Mexico. So, a lot of the talk might be about teacher pay, but that overlaps with this bigger picture of newly qualified teachers leaving in droves, according to the National Education Union, and other would-be teachers choosing not to join the profession at all.
Now, those sorts of clips, analysis clips, are coming up regularly on TV now, and it's interesting. It starts with the National Education Union, it finishes with the National Education Union, it uses our data, it checks our data out against the government, and we come out on top. That is clear message that our narrative is cutting through, against an overwhelmingly hostile press. We have an overwhelmingly right-wing hostile press, but our narrative is cutting through. And parental support for the strikes has remained as high as it was at the beginning. And the last strike, last Thursday, we closed more schools than we did at the beginning. So the strike is building. And that is done when another major union is not striking. That is a remarkable achievement. I just want to finish with another issue, which I think is important, which is when we balloted for our members to take strike actions, 2 other unions balloted with us and didn't meet the thresholds. We met the thresholds. It's most difficult for us to meet them because we're the biggest union organising in the most schools. How did we do it? Well, over 3 years, we've built something we called NEU Communicator, which is a database which syncs with our membership base, which means that a school rep, when we're doing the ballot, a school rep knows which members have voted and which haven't. And that means that the school rep can go to the members who haven't voted and ask them nicely to vote, because we have to get that first threshold. It means that we can contact our reps on a weekly basis or a daily basis with a key message for the day. It means we can send them the PowerPoint that we want to send them, and it means as a union, 2 weeks before the end of the ballot, when we were 10% below target, we knew exactly who we had to target, who we had to phone back, who we had to talk to get the vote up. So that's been key. So we have brilliant electronic kit. That really helps. It gives us fantastic information. But you know what? It doesn't replace the most fundamental principles of organising. Our most successful strategy for getting the vote out was branches holding a meeting with school reps, telling the school reps the narrative about what the government has done and not done, and why it is so important that members vote yes. The reps, school reps, then holding a meeting with their members and talking to them and listening to them about their workload, about their pay, and then saying why the ballot is so important. That is the most effective way to win the dispute. We also make a lot of use of Zoom, and Manuela knows this, but on the 3rd of January, in the middle of COVID, we had 400,000 members on a Zoom call, and we closed primary schools the next day. The government was saying, in the middle of the new Delta variant, go into schools. And we told our members they had a legal right not to go into a place which would endanger their health and safety. And by the end of that day, a third of primary teachers had written to their head teacher, and a letter we provided saying they would not be entering school the next day. And the next day the schools were closed. And we saved hundreds of members' lives because we achieved that school closure. So we use Zoom a lot. Last week I was on a Zoom call with 40,000 members about the reballot, and members are now used to getting on a Zoom call. And the final thing is, Kevin and I send a text or an email to the members once a week, and they used to complain about it, but now I go on marches and they go, and I go, I'm Mary from Kevin and Mary, and they tell me how much they love our emails or our texts, and how much they learn about what's happening in the dispute. So the third thing we've learned is constant communication with the membership. They're very busy, it has to be honed, it has to be targeted. But we have an email opening rate now of 60%. The normal email opening rate is 4%. So they are engaging with us, they're listening to the message, we're keeping them involved, we're keeping them up to date, and we're keeping them informed. And the final thing I would say is, the ballot only lasts for 6 months. So next week, we have to start a reballot in order to keep on the action. And the government is cynically hoping that we will fail our reballot. And I can tell you now, you're the first to hear this. We will win. Thank you.